Good evening, one and all. Warm welcome to the session, which is part of our research journey. And this research journey is actually something which we started, I think, a few weeks back. Let us make a quick recap of all that we have done so far. I believe that you are all with us throughout because this is a series which is moving in a sequence and we are trying to keep that sequence on. So I think for the first session, I was with you where we looked at the basics of research, how to develop a research idea, how to identify a research problem, how it comes from an issue which needs to be solved, and how we look at the environment around us and identify a researchable issue. Then I think this was followed by a couple or more sessions on review of literature, where we were trying to examine thematic based systematic review of literature, including bibliometrics and AI tools to identify studies and citations in terms of key terms, themes, so on and so forth. And again, we used the review process in different formats. And as of now, we are in terms of we are in a stage of having with us what is known as a research gap. So far, we are trying to see a research problem, the rich literature that is there in terms of the theories and concepts relating to that problem. And then after that, we are saying what is done so far and what you intend to do, or what is the gap between what has been covered so far and what you intend to establish further. So that's where we are now. So today we are looking at something which is quite interesting in terms of the research design. Now, why this is crucial? Because this is the framework for your entire research. It is your design, or it is when you establish the design that you get to know what are the research methods you need to adopt, what are the tools that you're going to collect, how are you going to go about the whole process, starting from addressing your questions and moving into the final findings which are going to be aligned with the problem under survey. So that is where we actually are so far. So let us try and see how we can go through this. Now, before I start with the design, let us try and understand that there are certain set criteria to look at how good is your research. And this generally involves reliability, validity, the replication that is possible. And if these three things are established, then you decide in terms of what exactly will be the design. So we start with this, looking at, just a minute. Yeah. We start with the first criteria for social science research is it reliable? Now, this is a big issue for us in all of our research. This has got something to do with what you're going to do with your research on a long-term basis. Are you trying to build up a career in academics or a career with the industry or a career with some of the business regulators or with the industry or wherever you are in social science research? Now, reliability is actually looking into whether the results will repeat. I've just put it in 2-3 terms. Whether the results will repeat is what indicates the reliability of your research. Now, what do you mean by this? What we mean by this is you are going to do a research and you're going to say that I took a sample, I did an analysis, I got some results. Now, anybody else who does this with a similar process is going to get a similar result. If the result is not going to be similar, under the conditions and using the instruments and using the entire structured format which you did, then that means your research is not reliable. It's almost similar to how you check the reliability of an instrument when you do maybe your BP check or your check for your blood sugar and so on. So if I look at my BP and I say my value is 120 by 80, any number of times any person does this with this my blood pressure check, it should give the same value. Now, if it was done with one instrument, I get 120 by 80. and another instrument, I get 180 by 80, and it's all different values. That means the whole process of testing is not reliable. So also, when you do a research, you say, I take this sample, I did this method, and I'm getting a result which somebody else feels that if in a similar conditions, if it is repeated, it does not give the same result. It means that there is some issue in reliability. That means we are talking about how accurate and precise the results will be when repeated by another person. So that's the whole issue of reliability. Now we come to validity. How are you going to establish the validity of your research? Validity of research comes in three forms. Now let us understand this very carefully, because this is the crux of your research. This is how we are going to prove that your research is significant. This is how you're going to prove or give evidence to the fact that your entire process is justifiable. What are these three forms of validity? Validity has three forms. One is measurement validity. How did you select the sample? How did you measure the response? Was it on a quantifiable qualitative states? And how accurate was your measurement? That indicates the measurement validity of your research. Again, internal validity. Internal validity talks about how you established cause effect relationship. How are you saying that the relationship between X and Y was like this? The relationship between price and demand was like this. When you're talking about this, if you're saying that whatever happened in Y is because of a change in X, and the extent to which you can establish this relationship indicates internal validity. The extent to which you're saying that whatever has happened to the dependent variable is because of a change in an independent variable, that indicates your internal validity. So whenever you're saying cause effect relationship, when you're saying one variable has an impact on another variable, and somebody says, no, how can you say that this happened because of this? It could be because of some other variable which intervened, or it could be because of the inaccuracy in the time that you have selected. So they are saying that what happened in Y is not because of X. Then that means the research, the work that you have done lacks internal validity. So internal validity talks about to what extent the effect that you are talking about is because of the cause. It talks about the extent of causality that you're going to establish. And external validity is actually referring to whether what you have found out has an element of generalizability. Or are you only saying that this, what I have found, is applicable only in this particular situation? I'm not sure whether it will apply in any other case. Now, this was the reason why we are saying, yeah, you need to have scope, you need to have parameters, you need to limit your study, that's all fine. But you make it when you shrink it too much, when you squeeze it too much, then what happens is that study will have application, or that study will have contextual relevance only in a very small dimension into which it relates. So then it loses generalizability. That is why a typical question comes in most of the research. Can you say what you have found out in your research context applies to other situations also? Has got something which is generic, has got something which can be said in other organizations, in other states, in other dimensions. That is generalizability. So what are we saying? What is validity? Validity is actually talking about what extent there is cause effect relationship, how what you have said is generalizable, and how accurate was your measurement. So when you establish this, you're talking about validity. So the criteria of validity is met through that. Now we come to replicability. What does this mean? Replicating the findings of others. Or we are saying that we agree to the I found out certain things which was in tune with what was existing. And generally we have a general tendency to agree with very celebrated theories, and we say that, okay, see, I did my study, and on these parameters, on these factors, it is in tune with the existing theories. So and there are also cases where we are actually not at all linking with the theories. So replicability or replicating the findings of others shows that it is valid. Because something which somebody said, I did a study in another context with another community in another village, or I studied how motivation is having an effect on one particular industry, and I'm finding that the general theories there are valid. So that is replicability. So if you're able to further strengthen something, that this does not again mean that it is always moving in that line. This replicability happens when context and factors have validity. If suppose that original theory and the original context had a set of factors which are not at all present in the which were not at all present in the context in which you did your study, then when you say replicability, it is actually affecting the validity. So your validity is in terms of establishing how you could bring in a replicability. So these are the three conditions under which we are looking at the criteria of a good research. Now, if these criteria need to be ensured, or in other words, if you want to say that my research is reliable, my research has validity, whatever it is talking about in terms of measurement tools are giving the accurate results. Whatever we talk about cause effect relationship, it is the effect is because of the cause. And many of my things can be generalized. It has a commonality in it. Even I'm proving it in that form, I'm establishing validity. That kind of a validity that we talk about actually requires or actually needs a good design. So let us now try and see what is this design. How do we conceive this concept of a design? How do you develop this design? How do you relate that design to the work that you're doing? Because in your methodology, you will be spelling out that my research follows exploratory design, descriptive design, experimental design, or a quasi-experimental design, whatever be. Now, once you have specified a design, then there is clarity in terms of validity, because the validity is based on what is your design. If you say my design is perfectly experimental, then the manipulating of variables is very important. If you say your design is exploratory, then the way you have designed your questionnaire, whether it is structured or unstructured, turns out to be material. So all the research methods that you adopt and the validation of your entire process is based on understanding the design that you have adopted. So let us try and see what this is. Now, this is a research design. It's the framework for the research. It's something like pathways to address strategies and to answer research questions. What is your research question? Are you trying to establish relationship between variables? Are you trying to look at the impact of one variable on another variable? Are you trying to find out answers to some questions on which there is no existing answer at all? Are you trying to find out the characteristics of something? Are you trying to just describe something? What are we trying to do? Or what are our research questions? Suppose my question is to identify characteristics of an industry or to identify problems and challenges faced by an industry. We see such titles which are saying problems and challenges of an industry. I didn't put any specific problem over there. I just said problems and challenges maybe of tourism industry or hotel industry. Now I'm just describing what are the problems, what are the challenges under the context in which I'm examining. So my design should be accordingly in that form. But if I'm saying that whether there is a relationship between advertising and sales for a product, now I'm establishing cause-effect relationship. So it is having a different design. If I'm going to establish what is the impact of an intervention, maybe what is the impact of training on the performance of somebody, then the design is having it is a different form, because I'm trying to evaluate something. It's an evaluation research. If I'm trying to look at relationship between variables without manipulation or without looking at the control of factors, then my design is going to be in that form. It is going to be a non-experimental design that I'm going to follow. So it gives you, once you decide what is your design, then you get rigor and strength in deciding how to answer the research questions. Otherwise, it will be like you say something, I want to do research, answer this question, But when I'm trying to answer that question, I'm doing a design which is not suitable for that. So this gives you a framework for your research. It's like a blueprint on your research process. Just like we make a blueprint just like an engineer designs a structure on paper, and then he says, okay, this will be the area, this will be the elevation, this will be the foundation, this will be the structure, and then you go by that. Or just like you have a blueprint of a ship before it is built, or the blueprint of a building before it is constructed, here you have a blueprint of the pathways that you're going to address in the process of your research. So that is a design. So it is talking about the framework. What is the framework? Now, let us try and see what are the general designs which do exist in social science research or even in general research, and how do they contextually vary, or how do they have an implication in terms of the different findings through which we come across. The first design, or the very preliminary kind of research, or a very basic kind of research that we do, is what we call the descriptive research. So what is happening here? The researcher is actually interested in describing situations, just describing situations or describing characteristics under their research study. So it is not specifically looking whether some relationship exists between variables. It is not precisely looking at finding out something on which there is no known factor or no known answer. It is just describing something. So this is very theory based. It's a theory based design, and it is created by just gathering data, analyzing and presenting the collected data. That's the only purpose. That means, as I said earlier, I'm saying problems and prospects of this industry or tourism industry in India, or the factors influencing health of citizens. I have not identified any health issue. I have not identified any relationship between diet and health. Nothing. I'm just saying problems of health, or I'm saying the features of this industry, and then I go on collecting data on that. And I say these are the features, these are the parameters, and things like that. So it's a very basic research. And descriptive, it just describes events and causes on something that happened. So you say that, okay, the industry was like this, it grew like this, it had these problems, it was affected by this. This is the data on the cases which went well, and these are the cases which did not go well. These are the reasons for it doing well, or these are the reasons for it not doing well. So the factors are known here. But only thing is, you're putting it in a very collective form. Suppose I'm saying that I would like to know which problem affected somebody from among maybe 10 problems which exist. So I'm not finding out what is the problem. I know that there are 10 problems, and I want to know which among that is affecting. So I'm just describing the problems which I found out, and I'm saying that this problem is more important there. Or when I know that the problem affects all tribes in a state, I want to know how it affects one particular sect of tribes, then I'm using a descriptive research. Or when I know that there are 10 factors responsible for something, and I'm just trying to find out which among that factor is dominant in a particular place. So I just take data on the factors and I find out where it is more. Or when I know that something is influencing both genders, but I would like to know whether male or female is more affected by that. These are all cases of research being descriptive. So this allows a researcher actually to provide insights into the why and how of research. So it's a very basic research. And by and large, when we are not guided by any specific purpose, that means we are just guided by, we just want a PhD and we just want to get some data, gather it, and I can do a descriptive research because I'm not exploring into something. There is some known facts, there is some known theories, there is some known reasons, there are some known problems, and from that I'm just trying to identify the characteristics of why something has happened. So it is theory-based design, and it describes events, causes, why something happened based on the existing facts known to that. So obviously we'll be using something like a structured questionnaire for this. That's why I said it's related to tools. We'll see the tools again in the next session, because I know which are the reasons, I know what are the characteristics, but I'm just trying to find out which among them dominates or prevails. So I'm just describing that. So that is a descriptive research. Now, we have another form of research, which is an experimental research. This is actually looking into cause-effect relationship in a situation. Whether rainfall is responsible for the production of a particular agriculture crop like paddy, whether price is influencing demand, whether health or food has got an impact on long life. So cause and effect. So it is causal research design, where one observes why something is caused. And is it caused by the independent variable, or is it impacting? They try to look at the impact of the independent variable on the dependent variable. So it's manipulation of variables. You're trying to control the variables. So I take the association between variables I want and I try to relate them. But when you try to relate them, keeping the intervening variables constant and then finding the effect, then your research design is experimental. But our problem with us is in many of our cases, we are not able to keep the intervening variables constant, and yet we claim that our research is experimental research. Our research becomes experimental research. That's why in science, experimental research can be perfectly carried out under laboratory conditions. You keep the intervening variables well manipulated, well controlled, well under your charge. Say for instance, if I think I referred to this in my preliminary remarks on the basics of research. Suppose I would like to see the impact of light in a chemical bonding between two chemicals. But I do not want to see the impact of moisture, humidity, sound. These are other variables which can intervene. I want to know the impact of light alone. So light is independent variable, and what happens to that in the chemical bonding is dependent on what happens through light alone. So in that case, I can do it perfectly under laboratory conditions. I can put these two chemicals to a soundproof container. So in that case, it is not influenced by sound. I can suck out humidity or whatever other factors under laboratory conditions. Then I take it to a dark room and I put light. So whatever change, if at all there is a change, I would say it is only because of light, because all other factors were nullified. So I could isolate the intervening variables and look at only what has happened to the dependent variable because of the independent variable. That is called experimental research. That means you have perfectly controlled the other variables. That is exactly experimental research. Now, when you claim experimental research, there is always a question which will come in social sciences more so, because in your scientific research under laboratory conditions, the reliability is something which can be proved very easily because it's under laboratory conditions. Anybody can test it and say that I'll also take it to the lab, I'll do the same experiment, and I'll find out whether what this person is saying in terms of cause-effect relationship, is it perfected out there. But in social science, it's not always possible for us, but there are means for experimental research. But we have to prove how this relationship actually existed, cause-effect relationship. If you say for example, in the example which I now said, I'm trying to see the relationship between production of paddy and rainfall. So if I take data on rainfall and if I take data on production of paddy, that association need not be essentially because of rainfall. Production of paddy is also influenced by use of fertilizers. Production of paddy is also influenced by insecticides, use of insecticides, or production of paddy is also influenced by irrigation. So how do you know that this production of paddy change that has happened is exclusively because of rainfall? If you can keep fertilizer, insecticide and irrigation constant, 100% constant, and in isolation study the impact of rainfall on production of paddy, then it is a perfect experimental design. But in many cases, there are cases where we can do, that is what we call experimental group and control group before. So there are means through which the other variables can be kept constant or its impact can be kept at least minimum. That is experimental design. And it is not just taking data from two variables that are linked and then saying whatever has happened in the dependent variable has happened because of the independent variable. So it must be through manipulation of variables or controlling the variables. Generally, it is done with small sample and generally under controlled conditions, because if there's no control conditions, the intervening variable will generally have its impact. And there will always be a question: how are you assigning the change in the dependent variable exclusively to what has happened through the independent variable? Because other forces will be there. Again, when I'm saying price and demand, demand could have increased because of season. It was Deepavali or it was Onam or something like that, and change might have happened because of that. It's not because of price. At that time, price went up, but there was seasonal purchase also. So on what count are you attributing this only to that? When you can do that under through manipulating the variables of the control variables, keeping them constant, then you call it an experimental research. In many of our research, it could be quasi-experimental. That means we can control it, but we cannot 100% get it perfected. We can say that we are taking a control group, we are bringing in conditions of control variables and controlling them. So it is semi-experiment. If you can perfectly control, you can say it's experimental research. So what is happening there is dependent variable, independent variable, intervening or extraneous variables. In the example which I now said, your fertilizer or your insecticides, they are all extraneous variables. So how do you control them? And if you're saying that that control is impossible, then you cannot claim the validity of, or that's what we call internal validity. You cannot claim internal validity for your research, because what has happened in the dependent variable is not exclusively because of the independent variable. Then internal validity is lost. Just like you say, if generalizability is not possible, external validity has got some problems in that. So that's where your design is experimental. So experimental and non-experimental, look at the difference. Generally, we have it with a small sample. But when you're non-experimental, you can have it with a larger sample across the country, across states. One, manipulation of variables, controlling the variables should be possible in experiment. In non-experimental, there is no control of variables. So that's why you say this many people who took tea had a life expectancy of 85 years. And this many people, another 100 sample of those who took coffee had a life expectancy of 90 years. And you're saying those who took coffee had a higher life than those who took tea. That kind of a research. So I'm just taking consumption of tea, life expectancy. Life expectancy, I'm saying, is dependent on the consumption of tea and or consumption of tea or consumption of coffee. So one variable dependent is the life expectancy and consumption of tea or coffee is independent. But the people who have consumed tea might have had different life patterns, might have consumed different other food, might have undertaken different well-being exercises, and those who have taken coffee might have done something. So it's all different. So, but I didn't look into that. I didn't control the other variables. I just took my observations. The first one is based on experiment. The second one is based on observations. I just took observations on life expectancy, observations on this, and I'm relating it to that. So that is non-experimental. So when do you say it's non-experimental? When I'm relating, but I'm not relating based on experiments. I'm only basing on observation. I'm not relating keeping the variables under control. That is what we say, manipulating the variables. So there's no manipulation of the variables. I'm just doing the relationship. So when we take two groups which are connected, of course, maybe consumption of tea and consumption of coffee is related to life expectancy, but there are so many other variables. I'm not keeping them under control. So many things which happen in community, many things which happen in social research, when you talk of economic change, social change, when you talk about health, when you talk about housing, when you talk about gender, when you talk about culture, so they could be influenced by multiple factors. And you cannot say this is exactly because of this. If you're just looking at the observation and comparing without keeping the intervening variables constant, then you're doing a non-experimental method. So you should decide whether your research is experimental or non-experimental or quasi-experimental. Quasi means it is semi-experimental. That means you're keeping them under control, but that control might not be 100% perfected control. So in that it is quasi-experimental. In many of our social science research, at least at times it is quasi-experimental, but we claim it is experimental. But if you claim it is experimental, then you must say that what has happened in Y is because of X, the relationship between X and Y. And if that can be proved without the intervention where you're saying that the other things have been controlled, you can say that your design is experimental. So it has internal validity also. Now, there is correlational research. This is non-experimental. Now, what are we doing? We are establishing relationship between two closely connected variables, maybe food and health, or physical exercise and well-being. I'm taking two variables. I'm relating. Now, the researcher measures these relationship between two connected variables. And he is saying that there was a change in the dependent variable because of the change in independent variable. I'm not controlling the other variables. I'm not looking at any forms of experimenting on it. I'm just observing. Two variables I'm observing, and I'm taking this. The type of research requires two different groups, which does not manipulate the variables. So no control of the variables, two associated groups I'm taking. I'm just saying, say for example, I'm saying that there is a relationship between advertisement and sales. Normally, when you give more advertisement, sales will increase. But I do not know whether in my case, this has happened or not. There is a general presumption that you're spending on advertisement to create sales, or you're doing some physical exercises in order to get good health. So that these are general presumptions which are true also. And what has happened in these two variables are things which are associated. But I'm not looking at the other variables, I'm not controlling them. And I'm just taking the relationship. That is what we mean by non-experimental design that we are following. So the relationships are connected. And again, there could be another thing also. You could again take variables which have got no common sense connection and still try to establish relationship. Say for example, I try to establish relationship between the food that I eat and the weight which my brother puts in. Now there is no relationship directly theoretically into this. But because myself and my brother, we are having food together, generally there could be a correlation. This is called nonsense correlation. It is not a non-experimental technique. Non-experimental technique is taking relationship between variables, but not keeping the intervening variables under control. And it's not manipulating the variables. It's not controlling the variables. You don't have any charge over the variable. You're just observing that. And you're trying to find out whether there is any change. Now your technique is non-experimental. Again, your research again could be exploratory. Now what is this? Exploratory research is conducted on some problems on which there is hardly any studies which refer to. On your descriptive research, there are existing theories on the causes, on the factors, on the problems, on the issues, and you're trying to find out which among that is prevailing. Here you do not have much study backing here. Shallow outcomes from review. Something is happening, but you do not know why it is happening. There is no theoretical support for its happening. There is no established relationships on it. There is no established theories on why this is happening. And but there is a problem or there is an issue on which there is nothing in terms of why, what, how. Nothing is available. There is no data, there is no theoretical backing on characteristics, problems, related aspects, nothing. But you are experiencing a problem. Now, if you want to find out why this is happening, you have to explore. Because it's a design which is bringing you right to start from the scratch. There is no known facts relating to it. So your investigations are carried out in detail for gaining insights and familiarity. So that you cannot give options also. You cannot give questions and you're asking whether it is because of this or that, because nobody knows how it is. You cannot give that it is identify one among this, because you do not know which among this is actually responsible for it. So it is an exploration from scratch. When something happens, and like in medicine, something happens, a new kind of virus comes up. Nobody knows how this virus is behaving. Nobody knows whether this death is because of that. In that case, medical research has to do an exploratory research on what are the causes. And they have to start from scratch. They have to look at all factors associated and do an in-depth research. Yes, allied kind of facts might be there for them, but they have to do something which is exploratory. So just before we go further, and most of these designs, some of which can have these are not all watertight compartments. It can have, like when you say experimental, and still you're saying that, okay, I'm keeping some variables under control. and then somebody says it's not perfectly under control. So there is a chance of it moving towards quasi-experimental. Again, when you're saying descriptive, whether all characteristics, all features are known, and are you identifying all some out of all that is known, or whether still there is maybe one or two characteristic which is not known, or is there a small element of exploration along with the descriptive? So those things can come up, but ideally what we mean is descriptive talks about describing the characteristics, events, factors, problems associated with that which are known, but you do not know which among that is responsible in your context. So you're only finding out, bringing out the contextual characters responsible for that in that particular context. Whereas in exploratory, nothing is known. So these are the designs that we have seen so far. Now, based on this, okay, we'll again do a recap of this when we look at the tools, look at the process, look at answering research questions, which is something which we will do further on to this. Now look at this, diagnostic research. What is this doing? It is a diagnostic design when the researcher is actually attempting to evaluate the underlying cause of a specific phenomenon or issue. It's just, that's why it is used diagnostic. Something similar to what happens in medical research. The underlying cause of a specific phenomenon or issue. Maybe in one village, we are seeing off late, a lot of people are committing suicide. Or in one village, the tribes are behaving in a particular form. Or in one village or in one industry, suddenly you see a continuous spread of frustration among employees. So what is the cause for this phenomenon or this issue? Or suddenly there's a drastic decline in the morale of employees in a particular context. Or suddenly there is a huge decline in the span of attention of students in a school. So we look into data relating to this. What was the data in the past? Suicides were very low. Now the suicides are high. Incurrence of this kind of behavior was very low. Now it is high. Or suddenly there has been a decline in the span of attention. Then we try to understand factors that create an issue or create that problem. So we're trying to diagnose why this is happening. And the base is the past data and the present data and the difference which it has created and the conditions under which it is created. So we're diagnosing why this difference has actually taken place. Now, if you're doing that, then your research is diagnostic research. So your design will be diagnostic. Then you can also, your diagnostic research will actually have three parts. One, because we are trying to diagnose, just like a doctor is trying to diagnose why a person's head is aching, or what caused a particular attack in the arteries of a particular patient. So the doctor is trying to do that. So he's trying to look at the inception of the issue, how this happened. Then when he looks at the inception of the issue, why your head is aching, why you have continuous headache, then he's diagnosing this is because of this. It could be because of something like your acidic problem, or it could be because of malnutrition, or it could be because of migraine. He's diagnosing that. Then he's looking at the solution for the issue. So that's what diagnostic ratio is. It's a specific issue. And that issue is only related to one case. It may be a group of people or one person or one village or one community, whatever it is. Diagnostic research. So if I'm doing that, I'm trying to find out, and that is also important because I'll be addressing or I'll be giving a solution to that. Earlier, when I was talking about last time basics of research, I told you a real life case of how a student could create a parking system for one company. Now, this student, who was a management student doing his MBA, he was observing the traffic jam. I don't know whether you recollect what we were discussing last time. The traffic jam which took place in one particular firm. And he understood there was a lot of loss of time and loss of energy in that. So using layout theories, can you have a parking system? So he was diagnosing past data. How much of time is lost in parking? And based on that data, he tried to find out that this is the problem, inception of the issue. And for that, how to resolve it. This is diagnostic research. Now you have evaluation research. What is this doing? It is evaluating the results or the outcome from an intervention. One is
diagnosing or evaluating something from an issue. Based on an issue, as I said, the issue could be suicides in a village, or the issue could be decline in span of attention, or the issue could be malnutrition in one particular context. So you're trying to find out what from the data, from which date it happened, how it started increasing, and you're trying to find out this is the issue for that, and then you're trying to resolve it. That is diagnostic research. But in evaluation, it's not the past data that you're using. You're trying to evaluate the results from an intervention. Classic example is what happens with training. Training is done to improve performance of employees. So training is an intervention to improve performance. So you can do an interview and try to find out what is the post-training performance. The intervention is training. Intervention can be given in terms of health. Intervention can be given in terms of education. Intervention can be given in terms of family planning. Now, after giving these interventions, what is happening? So you're trying to evaluate whether it is successful or not. After giving the intervention, if you find that the performance has increased, you're evaluating the training to be successful. After giving the training, you're finding there's no change in the performance, you're saying that the training is not successful. After giving the intervention on family planning, size of the family still continues to be large, which means the intervention is not successful. So you're evaluating after interventions. There are many interventions which goes in different forms. I gave you some example of training or family planning, education, interventions in health, interventions for preventing certain occurrence of certain events. When you see accidents are increasing with data, that is where diagnostic and evaluation is also related. Past data is showing accidents, road accidents are increasing in one particular place, in one particular context. So we give you an intervention on awareness. Now I'm looking at the cause of accidents in the past based on data and why that is increasing in certain points and all. Then I'm doing diagnostic research. But if I'm trying to find out what has happening after giving awareness on this, is the accident decreasing? Then I'm doing evaluative research. I hope you're following what I'm saying. So these are related. Using past data, using my test analysis, finding out the cause and then diagnosing it and then resolving it is diagnostic research. Whereas if I'm doing it in terms of an intervention that was given and trying to see corrections. If I'm trying to see what is happening with the campus, whether campuses are affected by ragging, I'm looking at the past cases of ragging in the campus, reported casualty, reported grievances, and how this is happening. Then I'm doing diagnostic research. Why ragging is taking place? What are the events that took place? What are the consequences? And I'm saying this should be done to prevent it. That is diagnostics. But if I'm saying that along with this, I'm trying to give some interventions in terms of maybe punishments that can be given for ragging, or in terms of getting affidavits on giving a undertaking that I will not be involved in ragging. Now I'm giving an intervention and I'm trying to find out whether how good is this intervention. After asking them to give this affidavit on ragging, that intervention, what is the post results? Now it is evaluation research. I hope you're following what I'm saying. So this is the design is evaluation. Now, some modern methods of, again, designs, which we call longitudinal design. What is this? This is rather time consuming, at time also cost consuming. Here the sample is surveyed again, or it is surveyed repeatedly. That's why we say longitudinal, north to south, top to bottom. Once you do the survey, again after intervention, based on what is your research question or what is your research problem, you do interventions at several points. That means something like what you do in your blood sugar test. You take a blood sample, do a test, and then you say that, okay, you have breakfast and come again and again, we'll do another test. Because you want to find out how the spiking actually happens and how the spiking actually increases. So you're doing the test again with the same person. Now you can do this. Suppose I take at random a large sample of say 11,000 people who belong, or say 15,000 people who belong to say 5,000 family. And I study their economic social status, their problems in terms of receiving access to housing. So one variable could be housing. Another variable could be health. The third variable, there can be multiple variables. Third variable can be economic, social empowerment. Of these 15,000 people who belong to 5,000 families. Now I do this at one point of time. Then after 1 year, I do it with the same 15,000 people. Again, I look at their economic, social empowerment. I look at their health and their housing. This is called longitudinal research. Again, I might do it after 1 more year. But this is generally for application. This is generally for different investigations and different purposive interventions. But for research, like what we do in terms of PhD, because we have deadlines, it's very difficult for us to repeat it. And what are we trying to do through this? What did you find out when you looked at health, social, economic empowerment, housing in 1 year? And what did you find out with the same sample when you did it after 1 year? So the same process you repeat. That is called longitudinal. And you come down further. It's based on purpose. And it can be repeated not just twice, thrice, any number of times, but it should be at least done twice. And that can be in the form of a panel study, where you take a random sample and do it, or it can be in the form of a cohort study, where you're saying that this cohort means a group which is similar. People who are in the same age group, people who are in the same gender, people who are in the same domicile, they are one group. You go on examining them repeatedly. It is a cohort study. Otherwise, you're not looking at that similarity in group. It is a panel study. So you go on doing this repeatedly, and it is done again with a definite purpose. It's not done without a purpose. You have a purpose behind it, because I want to know what is a change in the same group after some time. So many studies which are policy based, you have to do this repeatedly, and that is called a longitudinal design, which we normally have. Now we have a survey design, and this is a very common thing that we have, which is called cross-sectional design. So this is based on collection of data from different respondents at a point of time on one or more variables. Generally, it is on more variables. Now, that's what we all normally do. In many of our researches, we collect data from different respondents, classifying our respondents, maybe based on income, based on gender, based on domicile, urban, rural, or based on those who are in different professions. So you have different cases there. And you collect data from all these people at the same point of time. On the longitudinal is you repeat it several times. Here you're doing it the same at the same time on one or more variables you're using. Generally, we have more than one variable. We will look at their social empowerment. We might look at their economic empowerment. We look at the status change. We look at their political involvement, different things. But the data is collected from different set of respondents, and then you look at a pattern of association between the respondents. Do we have the same pattern with urban and rural? Do we have the same pattern with male and female? Do we have the same pattern with foreign tourist and domestic tourist? So that is a cross-sectional design. So you are doing it, your survey design is having this cross-sectional, looking at different variables, some of which can even be quantitative and some of which can be qualitative. So for example, when I'm saying economic and social empowerment can be in terms of decision making, it can be in terms of education, it can be in terms of involvement, some of which could be qualitative. But when I'm saying change in income, it is quantifiable. Change in salary that you have, change in asset holding, change in the holding of financial assets. These are all quantifiables. So it can be quantifiable, it can be qualitative, it can have multiple variables, but you're studying, collecting all this quantifiable, quantitative variables at one point of time from different respondents, different class of respondents, different cases, which you have at one. That is a cross-sectional design, which is a survey design, which we normally use in our research. Then you also have something which is case studies. Case studies is another design which we can follow in our general research formats that we have. Case study is actually an in-depth analysis of a specific case. In-depth, intensive study of something. It can be intensive study of a village. It can be intensive study of a community. It can be intensive study of a group of individuals, or it can be intensive study of an individual also. It can be intensive study of a firm. It can be an intensive study of one institution. So all these are case studies. So why are we doing a case study? A case study is to actually have an in-depth understanding about the characteristics, features, some issues which that institution is facing, or that village is facing, or that individual is facing, whatever be the case study, or that organization is facing, if you're doing it with an organization. So that is also a design. So here I am not talking about generalizing it, I'm talking about the validity in terms of having dealt with one case. I have solved one issue with one organization. I have understood one specific problem with one community, maybe with one sect of a tribe or something. So that's a case study. Now, when I do this case study, I should have these formats. What are the facts behind it? The data behind it? What are the issues for that particular organization or individual or that location is actually facing? And I must have my own analysis of it. Then you have your interpretations and inferences. But it should be all related to that particular case. Now, this could also have generic theories. Suppose you're finding a lot of suicides, which we said earlier, being committed in one village, which is all villages would have some suicides here and there, but you find more numbers coming in one village, or more number of happenings of certain things in one particular community. Now, when I'm probing that, there could be some fundamental theories on the characteristics which lead to this. But those characteristics are characteristics which are present in different places, but in this context, you're seeing it different. So how do you carry this? That is important when you're looking at case studies. So your design can also be a case study. But I'm saying that this is applicable only with this, and my intention was to resolve what this particular organization or this particular firm or this particular village or this particular tribe or maybe this particular individual is facing in a context. So that's what we mean when we are talking about a case study. Now, we have these is very important in your designs. You can have something which is, this can happen across your designs, which is qualitative as well as a quantitative factors based on the variables that you're using. Now, when you're saying qualitative, it's based generally on experiencing, feelings, expressions, which are generally of a non-numerical form. But even then, how do you measure them? Suppose I say I'm feeling good. What is the value that you attribute to good? Or how do you say one person says good, one person says I'm not feeling that good? How do you distinguish between the two? Or somebody says I'm feeling I want to express this as beautiful. Somebody says this is not, I don't think it is that beautiful. And you're taking a sample of respondents and cases in different contexts. So somebody says it is beautiful, somebody says I'm happy. What do you mean by that? And again, what do you say? Are you talking about overall happiness, overall expression, or expression which you're talking at a particular time moment? So this has got a lot of abstracts attached to it. Suppose I'm asking you, are you satisfied about an institution? Now, I might understand different things out of it when I'm putting it in a qualitative perspective. I might say that you're talking about the satisfaction of its cleanliness, or the satisfaction of its services, or the satisfaction of the way they are maintaining it, or I might be talking about the general satisfaction. So it's not what satisfaction are you talking about. Now, if I have availed one service the previous day and I did not find that service to be good, I might say everything is bad. So it is getting influenced by certain things, your feelings, your expressions, your thoughts, your experiences. It has got something like a halo impact on what is happening at a point of time. And that experience need not always be in terms of what is related to the question that you're putting across. Say, for instance, you're asking me about my employer, or you're asking me about my organization. And at that point of time, suppose I had a quarrel at home and I was very disturbed. And it is at that time that I'm getting, or immediately after being disturbed, I'm encountering your question. I might say that everything in that bag, I'm not happy with anything. Now, what influenced my answer is not the happiness with the organization, but the disturbance which I had elsewhere. So there also you have this qualitative. So that means qualitative phenomenon is not exact. It does not have a monetary numerical tag attached to it, but we need to measure it. So you have your scaling. We'll look into the scaling measures later. That is, I'm only looking at the design now. So when you have a design for that, which is qualitative, how to measure it, how to relate it,
So you have to say, okay, satisfaction on a scale. Again, satisfaction on a scale of how much? What will be the median? When will you, because a scale might have 5 or 7 tags: highly satisfied, satisfied, neutral, dissatisfied, very dissatisfied, and all. But ultimately, you would like to know how many of them are satisfied or dissatisfied, and what is the reason for satisfaction or dissatisfaction. So how do you scale them down in terms of measurement, and how do you come to conclusions in terms of its measurement? So those are the things which come in qualitative. But in quantifiable, variables are quantifiable directly. Suppose you're saying age, suppose you're saying height, suppose you're saying value of assets, so you're talking about investment, you're talking about savings, you're talking about the even IQ for that matter. And they have to be reliable in terms of how you measure them. That's where the measurement validity comes. Suppose I say somebody's height, I measured with one scale, and other person measure and say, no, this is wrong, and the other value comes. That is indicating the measurement validity is lost. But normally, because we have quantifiable scales which are generally perfected by standards, your quantitative aspect is generally taken care of, and we can go by that. So quantifiable, and then there is a tendency to put things in a qualitative perspective, even when the quantifiables are available. Say, for example, you're asking about, was there an economic empowerment in you? And you're saying it was very much there, somewhat, it was there to some extent, and things like that. Qualitative options. Now, economic empowerment can be directly measured in terms of whether there was a change in your income, change in your asset holding. So instead of doing that, you're asking them, okay, I believe it was there. So yeah, for certain things, you can use statements, you can use qualitative aspects, but in certain things where it is expressly capable of being measured, capable of being quantifiably judged, then you're using a relative scale and bringing an abstract value is not always justifiable. So that's where you have these designs in this form. Now, so that these are the designs. So generally what we understand is we have experimental designs. Cause-effect relationship are perfectly blended, keeping control variables under manipulation or controlled conditions. When it is partially done, quasi-experimental. When you're trying to establish relationship without looking at the manipulating variables, it is called non-experimental. Then you can have diagnostic, where you're looking at an issue, taking data that led to that issue, finding out facts behind the issue and diagnosing it. Or it can be evaluation, where you're looking at an intervention and trying to find out the trying to see what is the impact of that, or what happened post intervention, or how effective that intervention was. Then you're doing a evaluation research. Or you could be just describing the characteristics of something, a very pure theoretical research, which is saying, I want to find out the titles, which, as I said, normally reflect industry factors, or generally looking at I'm just saying in a study on such and such thing. So I'm just trying to describe the characteristics. It is descriptive research. And again, where there is nothing much known, and I'm trying to dig deep into the data. Descriptive research has already got data in terms of factors, characteristics, events. It is there, and you're trying to find out which among that. When there is no data and you're trying to dig in and get in some data, it is exploratory research. You go deep digging and explore and find out that. So these are some of the designs. Having said this, now we have to go into some of this analytics. That analytics is based on what is your research. So it can be diagnostic, it can be exploratory, it can be predictive, it can be decisional analytics. So let us see what these are. In diagnostic analysis, when you're doing a diagnostic research, you're looking at the past to find out why something happened. The past, it was like this. Now the data is moving like this, and you're trying to find out why. So you're saying, it is something, that's why I said it is something similar to what we talked about when we said the medicine kind of a thing. What is the recurrence? What is your past data? How long this has been there with you? What are the trends that are there? So we are making a diagnostic kind of looking into the past to find out something that is happening. That is your analytics for that. Then exploratory, you're digging into the data. and we are trying to find out something. There is nothing available. We are digging and finding something new with some specific questions. We are addressing something which are very specific on. So I'm exploring. So like somebody who goes to space, somebody who goes to the moon, and we do not know what is there. We do not. There's some planet. I know there is a planet, but I don't know whether there is air over there. I don't know whether there is water over there. I don't know whether there is life over there. I don't know what are the factors that are responsible for that. I don't know whether this kind of a product is existing over there. I don't know whether this is happening because of that. So I'm trying to dig in and find something new. Then your uh, research is actually exploratory. Predictive analysis is actually forecasting the future trends using statistical models. Very widely used in capital market, in your financial services. They try to predict, and like the last, whenever there was a decline based on information that had happened in this form, your head and shoulder models are all like, this is how the pattern moved. Whenever price went like this, whenever information took place, it went like that. So that kind of a predictions, it can be some kind of an extrapolation. So you're extending the past to the future and predicting trends, and you're creating models. Whenever relationship was like that, this happened. Whenever there was a trade war, this was what happened. Whenever there was a tariff imposed, trade moved like this. Whenever we had a war with another nation, export trends revealed like this. So predictive analytics. These are analytics. These are not the designs, but I'm just talking about how analytics can move on a similar line. Now we have decisional analytics. What happens here? It helps to understand past events. You're discovering, getting some insights, predictive future trends, and you make informed decisions. So when I'm taking a decision, again, I'm basing it on the past, and I'm trying to discover, get some insights from the past, and I'm predicting the future, and I'm making informed decisions. So the analytics is on the decision, the informed decision that I'm taking. I'm not just projecting the past. I'm not just predicting the past or predicting the future based on the past. I'm not just extrapolating and saying that, okay, every year there has been a 10% change. So next year also there will be a 10% change. That is predictive analysis. I'm saying every year there has been this change. The past has moved like this, but because of these factors, I believe that what is going to happen now is going to be like this. So let us take a decision like this. That is decisional analytics. And that is very important. And your decision is always based on choice from among the different alternatives that you have. That alternatives, the alternatives that you chalk out actually comes from the problems the data that you have, and from there you say that these are the alternate pathway, and then I'm not fully basing it on extrapolating the data. I'm also basing it on certain other variables and taking an informed decision. So this happens in your decisional analytics, which is also impacting the way you do your research. Now we have, so that's what a design is. What we covered now is what a design is, and what is the relevance of a design, and what are the analytics that leads to a design. Now that being the design, now what are we trying to do? We are making purposive statements of objective. We have already got the problem of us, which we saw in the earlier class. We have done the review of literature. Now we are making purpose statements, objectives. And we are deciding the methods for collection and analysis of research data. Should I use questionnaire? Should I use interview schedule? Should I base it on observation? Should I base it on past data? And again, if I'm using interview, should I structure it? Should I leave it semi-structured? It's all based on what is that you want to find out. If you are trying to do an evaluation research, then you're looking at an intervention and what happened pre-post intervention. If you're trying to do diagnostic, you're looking at the past data and trying to identify an issue that came out of it. If you're doing descriptive, you're only looking at characteristics which are known. So it is based on that. How are you going to do your analysis is also based on that. That means your entire methodology. Probable objections that can come to research. Something which we encounter perhaps towards the end of our research. The probable objections which can come to research. Say, for instance, somebody might say that you are saying your design is experimental, but have you kept the variables under control? Is there a possibility that other variables could have intervened? You're saying economic, normally one big issue which we face in social science research is empowerment. Empowerment of rural people, empowerment of masses. We look at social empowerment and we look at economic empowerment, political decisions and all. And we say that before this happened, before that intervention happened, evaluative research, it was like this, and after it is like this. But that the period after the intervention happened, certain other things could have happened. Somebody will say maybe economic empowerment might have taken place not because of your rural empowerment program. It can happen because another person in the family got employed. And you're saying it is because of this. Just like the last time we were discussing in social science research, we have this looking at family planning impact. So, what is normally done? You go to a village, you select a sample, and you talk to them about the benefits of a small family and family planning interventions. You give them the intervention, the methods, and then you go out. You take the size of the family and you come out. After years, again, 5 years, 6 years, you go back to the village. You do a review. And you again find that earlier the average size of the family was 14 and now it is 4. So 14 has become 4. So you're saying that the intervention is very successful. But suddenly somebody else comes and tells you that that village was affected by tsunami and many people died out of tsunami. And you're saying that the size of the family has come down. It could be because of other factors. Just like we now talk about life expectancy. The life expectancy has gone up, yes, because of health and other interventions also. But there is something interesting. If you look at, say, 50 years back, 100 years back, 200 years back, infant mortality was very high. So immediately after birth, a lot of people were dying. That could also be one of the reasons for low life expectancy. That's why there are other related factors also. So if you're saying something is only because of this, there are attributable other factors. So that is what actually creates probable objections to your research. You talk about price elasticity, you talk about elasticity to different factors, you talk about the impact of income, you talk about the impact of sales, you talk about decisions, education. You're saying literacy created this, awareness created this, and something else might have happened in between. So the probable objections to research, settings for the research study. Are you doing exploratory? Are you doing that? What are the settings that are required? And even timeline and analysis, because you want to do a longitudinal study. And the right methodology demands going back to the same respondent, say 4 times or 5 times. You will get the right answer about their economic social change or about the change in their housing and education. Suppose it's a very, you're looking at the efficiency of a policy, and that requires 5 iterations. You have to resurvey that same group on the same variables, maybe for 4 or 5 times. And if that requires a gap of maybe 1 year between each survey to gauge the change, then the timeline would be something like the process itself will take 5 years. So that is a kind of longitudinal research which you have to do. So timeline, or if you wanted to have it one slot, cross-sectional design, then the timeline will be different. And your analysis. So it is the elements of your design is talking about all these things, how it actually integrates into all these things, and how we go about on all these lines, which are very, very important in the different path that we actually take. Now, what are the benefits of a research design? That is where we will stop for today, and we will go into the rest of looking into the rest in the next session on the tools and variables. One is it brings in clarity. Once I know my research design, that is, I am following exploratory, I am following descriptive. So if I know my research is descriptive, I can say my questionnaire can be structured and it can be structured in this format. My collection tool can be like this, the known characteristics. If I know it is exploratory, I have to put it accordingly. If I'm trying to put it as evaluation, I have to look at the intervention. So based on what is the true purpose of your research, you develop a clarity. Primary clarity comes from the research methods. And more specifically, again, your collection. This is one area where you have cross issues, where suddenly you say that I used a tool to collect in this form, and then that tool is not suitable for the design. The tool is not the right tool for your design. So clarity on how the process should go, starting from the methods and the tools that you adopt, actually comes from the design. Again, validity. If you're saying perfect, that is what happens in many of your science research. They establish experimental design validity by saying that anybody can test it. I have nullified all the intervening variables. My impact on X on Y is like this. And you can test it anywhere. You can repeat it any number of times. You will get the same result. That establishes validity. So that is where we are saying validity, that measurement validity, the internal validity. And you're saying that this, when done in any other conditions, it is generalizable to any other place. You're saying even it is having a generalizability to it. So the wider it has generalizability, the greater is the independent dependent impact. You're establishing validity. And your validity actually comes from the kind of design that you're using. If I'm saying I have used a case study, I'm not talking about generalizability. You will not be judged in terms of generalizability. If you're saying that you used a non-experimental design, you will not be questioned for internal validity, because you're not saying cause effect relationship is entirely because of the controlling the intervening variables. You're saying that there's a cause effect relationship, but I'm not saying that I have I have manipulated the control variables. So the internal validity is only to that. I'm only talking about association based on observations. If you're saying that your design is descriptive, then you're saying I'm only talking about which among the factors or which among the characteristics I have described is responsible for something in the context in which we have actually examined it. I'm only talking about that. So you must be very careful. And some of us say that we have used, it is descriptive and exploratory. Then comes, where is that you have used exploratory? What was that tool that you used for that exploratory part of your research question? So it has to have a validity. So that's very, very important. Then again, reliability. How fast your conclusions, the results that you have got, that are justified. So you're saying that I got this results, and this results are something which any other person will get. If the conditions that I have said is working, everybody will get it. That indicates reliability. If the data is normal, this is what it comes and this is how it comes, and I'm establishing that, and that is reliability. And when these three things are there, obviously there is better collection. There is better analysis. Otherwise, they go missing. And again, what you have? Better conclusions. Because once you have established reliability, validity in terms of the design, then your conclusions get validated. It's not just the process and the question that gets validated. The conclusions are something which I'm saying in terms of the case study, I'm talking about this conclusion. And I'm saying this is applicable with that person, that village, that organization, because it's a case study. And your communication also gets clarity. Because I have said what is my design. I have said what is my purpose, which is perfectly in tune with the problem and the research question that I have developed. And finally, you're making best use of the research resources. The best kind of analysis that you do, the best kind of processes into which you involve, they all come in sync. Otherwise, you stand out to have a set of relationship which is not always proved. So these are the benefits of the design that you have. That's why I said it is similar to what happens in engineering. It is similar with what happens in medicine. They all have a design, they all have a plan of action on how to go about it. After understanding the problem, okay, you need this. Somebody says, I need a structure like this, I need a building like this, I need a road like this, or I need a dam like this. Then based on those features, you create a blueprint. and you say these are the reasons why it is kept like this. If you make it like that, this might have this problem, this land has got this elevation issues, or this is a marshy land. Accordingly, you make the design. Same, you do it in other cases also. So here also, that kind of a blending is very important when we are talking about the structure into which we actually relate. And that is where the design is important. And our understanding of this design comes right from the problem, the researchable problem that you have, the literature that you have, the gap that you have identified. We have seen in detail how that gets sunk into it. And we were also talking about forward linkage and backward linkage that is existing. Forward linkage is problem, research question, objectives. Then you have the literature, the hypothesis, findings. So there, when you talk about this, how do you formulate the process leading to your methodology? How do you become directional in terms of your methodology? Is precisely dependent on the design that you build for your research. But if this is not firm, or if this is shaky, obviously we have this problem of relating it to our methods. That means there will be what you call, we have to discern the entire process. Not discerning it is like I'll be using descriptive design, but I'll be saying it is evaluative, or I'll be saying it is experimental when it is non-experimental, or when it is generally quasi-experimental. So these factors are things against which we need to have our perfect understanding of factors. So that's where I'll be ending today. We'll have one more session. That session will be actually, we will be discussing this further, and we will be going into reviewing some of these aspects and trying to look at it in terms of the tools, basically starting from the tools for collection and how to design them. And that designing, from the design, it actually goes into the concept of materiality. Materiality of the data, usability of the data, relating the data to the variables. So we'll be using this into that part, and we will be completing it on that line. We'll be basing it on that. Like what is a variable, how the variable is taken, how we relate it. That is what we'll be looking at tomorrow. Now, the materiality aspect, I'll just put some light on that before we go into the variables. Variables and materiality is based on what is your research question, what you want to get out of it. I might ask questions which are irrelevant. We saw that in the last time when we were looking at, I said head is aching, diagnostic research. You go to the doctor, and the doctor is asking you some questions which are not actually related in any way to what is the problem. Like that, we might ask questions which are not actually relevant, which are not actually material to that context. It might be a fact, but might not be a material fact. And you are relating between variables which actually should not be related. Because other day we were talking about, suppose you say something, I am taking an issue in tourism, and I'm trying to find out the relationship between how the same set of your respondents respond to a variable in tourism. But the factor that you're taking there might be gender, where it is not, gender is not an important factor. That was one issue which we encountered very recently. The more important factor there perhaps is domestic and national tourist. The issue relating to gender comes when a discrepancy in gender is affecting the variable. But unfortunately, you had data with you in terms of gender of the tourist, and you take data relating to that. There could be another case where the difference in the study factor will come in terms of gender, but you're putting the question in terms of domicile. There is no need of a difference coming out inherently based on domicile, but the factor relates to how people based on gender look at it. But you actually are doing the difference in terms of domicile, where the domicile is not very important. So these are things which are actually turning out to be relevant when we put it in the context of the design. So that's what we have covered so far. We are trying to look at those things in terms of that aspect of how a rich design can come. So anything relating to this within the limitations of time that we have, which you would like to ask, raise, or put in terms of social science research, which we can have. Let us try and look at that. And maybe based on that, I think you can also have a, that's why we have put the two sessions very close. You can look at your own research problem that you have, the methods that you have. Some of you might have designed your questionnaire or will be in the process of designing the questionnaire. So what are you going to tag your design with? So those are some of the issues which you have to look into in a realistic context. So even if it is not today, tomorrow again we are meeting up. So you can further raise that and try to relate that. So thank you so much. Now, I think we have some time for question answers. So anybody wants to raise something, please do that now.
Good
Am I
evening,
audible
sir.
to you? Yes, please.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah.
Sir, I had a question, sir. In experimental research design, sir,
Yeah.
you said that there would be a dependent variable, independent variable, and intervening variable, sir.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask a question, sir. In exploratory research, also we can have these variables, dependent,
Definitely,
independent. Is
definitely,
it possible?
definitely. But the focus is different. Like in
Okay.
exploratory, our primary objective is like we do not know. In
Okay, sir.
exploratory, if you're saying experimental, that means you're saying something is caused by something.
Yes.
But the idea behind exploratory is we might have a hypothetical relationship that this might
Okay.
be because of this.
Okay.
Whereas in the other one, our purpose that might be because of this, or it might not be because of this, and we are trying to find out whether it is. But our purpose is not primarily to establish association.
Okay,
Our
sir.
purpose in exploratory is to find out something on which we hardly have, or there is scarce theory to support it. That is exploratory. Whereas
So, but based on these variables, so we can frame our working hypothesis.
definitely,
Is it?
definitely. But what I'm trying to say is in exploratory,
Yes.
we are not going by a foregone conclusion that this leads to this. We are
Okay, sir.
trying to find out whether that association is existing. But in experimental, we are saying these two variables are associated. The association is known, but we are trying to find out to what extent, because theory says that's what I gave you some examples. Theory says that rainfall will give more agriculture production. Theoretically,
Yes.
we are saying that advertisement will give sales. Theoretically, we are saying that there is a relationship, price elasticity. When price comes down, demand will go up. These are theoretically said. So we are believing that this relationship is accepted. Theoretically, it is accepted. Now we are trying to find out what is the impact. Is this association perfectly related, or is there a partial correlation, or is it fully affecting that? Now, for that, you take data, you take past data, and you associate. But when you associate, how are you saying that the other variables have been kept under control? That is, say, for
Okay.
example, I'll give you a classic example again. In animal houses, in medical research, that's a classic example of this. In animal, that's why we are saying classical, we call it classical experimental design. A perfect case of experimental design. So what happens there? In animal houses, which is typically used for your experimental research, they would like to test different drugs. So initially it is tested on animals. Of course, there is animal ethics committee and all that. And if you look at these animal houses and all these research institutions, they are brought up in very hygienic, healthy conditions. Now, how do they test a drug? They test a drug by taking two offsprings which come from the same mother. Why? Because genetically they are of the same species. They are of the same age. They eat the same food. So they are all identical in all aspects. And they give this drug to one of the offsprings, one of the animal offspring, and they observe both. The one on which the drug is given is called experimental, and the other one which is observed is called the control group. So if there is any change in the one in which the drug is given, we are saying it is 100% because of the drug. Because if it is because of climate, change would have come in both. If it is because of food, change would have come in both. If it is because of genetic factors, change would have come in both. Now, if there is any change in the experimental, it is only because of the drug. That is what we are saying, 100% classically perfected experimental design. Now, our objective here was not to just classically look at the cause of something, which is exploratory.
Our objective here was to specifically look at the impact of the drug. What is causing a change in the animal because of the drug? That is what we're saying cause-effect relationship. I think I've shed some light on that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, what again, when, examples which I'm giving, you can see that many of these examples which when I'm talking about the impact of light or when I'm talking about the impact of animal, that kind of impact you cannot, suppose I talk about a community or I talk about an intervention in terms of health or in terms of awareness. When suppose accidents and awareness, I'm talking about the intervention, you gave awareness about accidents and then you're saying what happened post that. And you're saying post that accidents have come down. I cannot 100% attribute to this. If I want to 100% attribute to this, I must take another group which is in a similar locality to which awareness was not given. That's a control group. But to get a control group which is exactly like the animal case that I gave is very difficult. So that's why we are saying in many cases it will tend to move when the control conditions are not very accurate. It will tend to move from experimental to quasi-experimental.
Thank you so much, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, please.
Sir, today's session was very much informative.
Yeah,
I
thank
really
you.
do appreciate your effort. I just want to have my message to technical team that chat boxes, we cannot type our problems in chat box. It is disabled. Some of our friends,
Disabled?
yes, it's disabled. We cannot type our message in
There was a
chat box.
technical snag. Okay, I think.
Okay. Hopefully, sir, by tomorrow, I will implement all these things in my what
Sure.
I have in my mind regarding objectives, and hopefully
They're
tomorrow
saying,
I'll be
yeah,
questioned.
okay. You have
Okay.
something to ask now. Even if the chat box is not enabled, you can raise the question. Otherwise, we can again meet tomorrow with whatever.
Yes, sir. Tomorrow I'll be having my question. Thank you, sir. So
Thank
kind
you.
of you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. What is the question? How quasi-experimental design is different from? Okay. Yeah, this question I think I answered. I'll again put that once again. Your question is what is a quasi-experimental design? First, understand that it is somewhere between experimental and non-experimental. That means in experimental, we can keep the intervening variables under control and you're doing it based on an experiment forms. It's not just observation. In non-experimental, we are only taking the observations. We are not manipulating the variables. So this is the difference between experimental and non-experimental. When you're saying quasi-experimental, that's why I said social. I gave you already 2-3 examples. I am doing certain things to keep it under control. I gave one example of awareness. I'll give you one more example. I gave you one example of family planning. In the family planning case, let us say you go to a village. You're taking the data on the average size of the family and you get some figure like 10 or 8. And then after some period, you're looking at reviewing it. You're trying to see whether it was effective or not. So one case is you're not keeping the control variables intact. Second case is now you're doing something with the control variable. What you're doing is you're taking 2 set of families in the same village. They live under identical conditions. And now you're taking what has happened in both these communities in the same village. So when I'm saying something like tsunami happened over there, it could have affected both the groups. So I'm saying that I have kept the intervening variables of tsunami, disasters, which will affect population. I've kept it under control. But still there is a property that it is not 100% perfected. Just like what I said in an animal house or what I said in the case of the impact of light. What is happening in the lab is you can nullify all other factors and keep it 100% constant. But when I'm doing it in a society, I might do before after comparison. I might have experimental things, but I might not be able to keep it 100% perfected in that level. So there can be something in terms of a difference. So that means it's not perfected in terms of control variables. You're keeping the variable under control, but it's not like something which happens under the lab conditions. It's a societal condition. It's a social condition. So there you have some problem in terms of keeping it 100% under control. Another question is regarding reliability and validity. Validity talks about how the measurements you are taken
when it is repeated. That's why I gave you the example of BP. When somebody else is doing it, and you say that I took data in this form and I collected it in this form. If somebody says that I'm also going to do it in that same form using the same tool, will you get the same data? Will you get the same result? You're talking about the results which come out of that. When I'm saying I did a test with A, patient A, I got a value of 120, 80 for my BP. Another person comes and also does the test, and he again says when he repeated, the same result has come 120, 80. That means the result is reliable. Whereas when A did one result came, B did another result came, it means that it is not reliable, because every time the same method, you're doing the same method, but results are coming different. This is reliability. That is what you do in reliability for the tool, reliability for the collection. Validity means, there are three validities. Measurement validity is talking about how accurate is the measurement tool. Second one is talking about how directly the relationship between cause and effect is existing. That is what we call internal validity. Is the effect a result of the cause, or is the result that is coming from some other factors, not as a cause factor? Then you're saying its internal validity is lost. External validity is talking about whether what you're talking about can be generalized into a larger context. So validity and reliability are, in terms of measurement, they are slightly associated, but largely one talks about the results when repeated showing similarity. That means anybody can test it. Again, suppose I'm saying that in a particular, I'm putting it in the science context to make it more perfected. Suppose I'm saying that when two liquid, let us say A, B, whatever that liquid or chemical is, I'm not from chemical sciences, I'm just giving an example. And I'm saying that its boiling point under these conditions, experimental conditions, is this degree temperature. It will boil. Then wherever any person does it, it should boil at that degree. That is reliability. Whereas when somebody says it happens at this degree, it happens at this pressure, it happens under this condition, another person is doing it, it is not happening under that conditions, it indicates that it is not reliable. The other one is talking about the impact side of it, the outcomes that come out of it, that is validity in terms of cause effect or in terms of generalizability. Some other questions which I missed out, Amos, you can read it out for me. Some questions are left still unanswered. Any question which I missed out? Reliability I said. Then this one I said, I think one more question was there in the chat box. And there was another question. Anything else which I missed out you would like to repeat? Anybody want? Okay. At what should determine the appropriate research design? How do you how do you decide your appropriate design is based on what is your research question? Is it necessary to have? It's not necessary to. It is not always necessary to have external validity. That is where. But if you say your design is like that, you should have external validity. That's why I said both your question in terms of which design you should choose and how you establish external validity is based on what is your design. So what is your design is based on what is the question that you want to answer. If you want to establish cause-effect relationship, keeping the control variables intact, you must say my design is experimental. If you want to look at how good an intervention has been, like the training example that I gave, then your design should be evaluation result. If you want to find out something on which there is no characteristics available, you want to do from scratch, then your design should be exploratory. So what is your design is based on that. Then whether every design should have internal validity, it's not based on that, because I'm saying non-experimental. Then I'm saying that characteristics are associated, but non-experimental still shows relationship between the factors. So that is how it actually goes. So that is a parameter in which it should go. So the design, whatever you're saying, in tune of the design, it should be justified. If you say descriptive, yes, you establish characteristics alone. You don't go exploratory. So that's what it is actually done over there. Is it necessary to have that I already answered. Is it necessary to have an external validity if our study does not generalize? It's not necessary. That's what I said earlier. That if you establish that you're generalizing, then your design should be in tune with that. External validity comes also experimental.
If you're saying that you're establishing relationship between variables, then you're saying experimental. If I'm saying that I'm not using experimental design, then I cannot say that the control variables have been negated. But the problem is, suppose you are saying I'm using non-experimental design. So then internal validity, I'm not directly talking about control variable. But if the research question is such that internal validity is so supreme there, then others will question, why did you use non-experimental design? See, the validation comes in two process. One is you're saying you used a design. Based on that design, external validity was not there. But suppose the examiner feels that this should be an issue which is generalizable. In case studies, there's no generalizability. Or suppose the issue is where control variable impact is so strong, and then you're saying that I didn't use it, then that can be questioned. So that's why you're saying the resultant object. When do you use non-experimental? When you have a very large sample, a very diverse, heterogeneous sample, and it is very difficult to control them. Then you can say normally it's difficult on a very wide spectrum to keep it under control. Therefore, I use non-experimental design. That could have some logic. But if you say that directly you're talking one-to-one association, where there is a control variable which is very strong, and yet you are not taking it, then that can be questioned. So your validation is going to be based on which is the design that you used and how that design is relevant to answer your research question. If I'm using a case study, I'm not talking about external validity at all. If I'm using just an evaluation study, I'm looking only at the intervention, like training question, which was now asked. I'm not looking at the other aspect. So what is your design? That design must stand to be valid in the context. Any other? Yeah. When try to opt out to research design, why it seems like what was it? It seems I didn't get why it seems most many RD.
When I try to opt for a research design,
Many research
it
design
seems like almost many research design
are suitable. Okay, that looks like, that's what I said, it looks like suitable. Suppose you look at the distinction between diagnostic research and evaluation research. Both are trying to find out what happened because of something. Both are evaluating, but one is evaluating in terms of what happened in the past. Other is evaluating in terms of an intervention. So the difference is quite narrow. So that way you have to see how it is actually clearing that impact at that particular level. Yeah, any other thing? Yeah. What, yeah.
if
What
we
is
study
the-
customer perception,
What is the research design that should be used? If you study customer perception, okay, when you're studying customer perception, it is a qualitative research. Now, you're trying to only describe the known perceptions which are available. What is the perception? What are the different factors of those? So perception factors are by marketing research if it is already known. And you're trying to find out which among those perceptible factors are present in a particular context. Obviously, it is descriptive research. But if you're trying to say something in terms of perception in which no identified perception pathways are known, it can become exploratory. But generally, the perception levels, identified perception traits, perception pathways are known, and you're trying to identify which among that is present in the product and in the context in which you're doing research, then obviously it is a descriptive research. Everyone, yeah. Other one is, yeah, while some evaluation research, is it like a post-evaluation? Definitely it is a post-evaluation, but it's a post-evaluation based on intervention. The other one is a post-evaluation based on past and trying to predict the future. So you're trying to evaluate based on intervention. I gave you an example of road accidents and intervention on awareness, or size of family and intervention of family planning. So there are so many interventions which are put in, and you are evaluating the efficacy of that intervention in terms of post event or post intervention data. Anything else? Anything unreferred? So while doing that, we already answered.
That's it.
Okay.
I guess we have gone through all the questions.
Yeah, okay. So then thank you so much, and let us see how you come. You can just, I think, as an exercise and as a continuum, because this is not like it might sound that certain thing is very experimental, but it can be semi-experimental. Certain things can sound to be diagnostic, but at times it might be evaluative because there could be an intervention. Certain things might sound to be like very descriptive, and or you might be looking at it as exploratory, but primarily it is like known factors, known characteristics, known events, known factors. So it is descriptive. So on that line, you look at your work, and once you identify that my design is this, then how do I establish that? But your design must be, yes, you can choose your design based on what you're doing. You can identify your design, but your design must also have a construct validity. When for a research, I'm talking about one-to-one relationship between two variables, and I'm saying that I'm not using, and I'm not concerned with control variable, even when the control variable could have been kept constant. And I'm saying I did non-experimental. Or when I'm trying to look at the impact of intervention, I'm saying that I'm not doing evaluative research. So that means you're going wrong in terms of the diagnosis of what pathway you're actually using. In agriculture, entrepreneurship, what is the agriculture entrepreneurship is not a research problem. If you tell me what is a research problem, in that only I can talk about the design. Agriculture entrepreneurship is a very wide area. In that, are you talking about production? Are you talking about marketing of agri products, or what is the issue? Only then you can decide this. It's based on your research question. What is the research question that you want to probe? Under that, only that can be something which can give you a kind of possible answer to that. Yeah, so if there are no other questions, shall we conclude? So thank you so much. Again, feel free to come, feel free to interact, feel free to join in more kind of interactions, because none of us are perfect in what we are doing. We all have our limitations. We all have our own what do you call obstacles in free movement. But when we discuss, when we come together, when we understand one another, when we look at our real research issues, it gets slightly perfected, it gets slightly improved, and that's what we are trying to look at. So try to let us learn together. That's what I would say, rather than saying that something is perfect, something is final, something is exact, because we look at the society, we look at social science criteria on a larger landscape. And many of the certain things are controllable, certain things are beyond control. So try to take it in that perspective and go on that line. So thank you so much. Good night, and wish you all the very, very best in all your research perspectives.